Advertising fused with journalism, which will pay you much more money. They've decided to just prostitute themselves to keep it going.
In order to thrive, media has to sell. It has to get subscriptions, eyeballs, clicks. And for many traditional outlets, it's been years of struggle. Bureaus closed, subscriptions down, paywalls up. But traditional media still has credibility, authenticity, and trust. Advertisers are willing to pay for that. As Neil MacDonald explains, news is surviving by going native.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. AM New York, it's a free paper. Good morning. Good morning. God bless you. God bless you.
It's probably time we all stop pretending we don't know where old media are heading, particularly newspapers. They're heading for the grave, quickly and directly. Newspapers that once had hundreds of employees now have dozens. Classified ads, those pages of pure gold, have evaporated. Advertisers in general have followed readers and viewers, and nowadays readers and viewers are mostly found on internet gadgets.
Read all about it. Add codes to Bridget. Free paper.
You want extra? You want to read all about it? It's everywhere, and it's free.
Free paper.
And by the way, making content available for free online was never a business model. It was a form of unassisted suicide. So, you're a broadcaster or a publisher. You've already laid off half your newsroom, but revenues keep shrinking and debts keep piling up, and you've got a payroll to meet. So what do? Well, you do what you have to do. You do what your advertisers want you to do, even if what your advertisers want you to do might involve some ethical modifications.
You go into this new horrible form of advertising fused with journalism, which will pay you much more money. They've decided to just prostitute themselves to keep it going. That's the bottom line.
Andrew Sullivan is an author and an editor and one of journalism's foremost evangelists for the old ways. Journalism should clearly be journalism, and ads should clearly be ads. No blurring, no exceptions.
That's it.
But a new sort of ad is erupting everywhere, and Sullivan is appalled.
It is advertising that is portraying itself as journalism. Simple as that. It is an act of deception of the readers and consumers of media who believe they're reading the work of an independent journalist, but in fact, they're reading something paid for by corporate advertisers.
Look for it and you'll find it quickly enough. Sometimes it's called the Around the Web section on newspaper websites. Sometimes it's From Our Partners, or even worse, Promoted Stories. Whatever, it's earning a lot of money. It looks like journalism. Click on it though, and you'll probably find yourself looking at a slickly packaged ad.
There are a lot of differences between broadcast and something like Netflix.
In the industry, for some reason, it's most commonly referred to as native. Where did the word native come from? What's that got to do with it?
I think it's an ancient Canadian term.
Yes, no, it is. Troy Young runs online publications for the Hearst Empire. He believes this new sort of advertising may offer what old media has so desperately been seeking for so long: financial deliverance. Native may finally monetize the internet, may even save an industry.
On television, time controls the flow of media. So you're subjected to that advertising as part of the media stream that's being created. Similarly in magazines, you flip the page and there's an ad there. On the internet, it's really easy to ignore advertising, and I think what Native is doing, and the really good thing about Native, is it's forcing the sort of the advertising economy to create better content that interests consumers.
What Young means is that the old-style internet ads, the pop-ups and the banners, just didn't work. They were simply annoying. Comedians like John Oliver ranted about them.
Because did you know that if you ever actually click on a banner ad, you literally get taken to a page that reads, "Hey, is everything okay?"
But disguise an ad as something readers do want to read, like a list of silly things, or cat videos, or some quirk shared by movie stars, and watch what happens. Actually, BuzzFeed happens. This is the Manhattan headquarters, or perhaps more appropriately, the Manhattan playground of BuzzFeed, the online home of silly internet clickbait. Its boardrooms are named after cat videos that BuzzFeed helped go viral. No. BuzzFeed is the king of native content. It's hard to tell a BuzzFeed story from a BuzzFeed ad. Oh, and one other important bit. BuzzFeed took in $150 million last year.
If you have one rule here, I suppose it's don't be boring.
No, I don't think that's the rule. I mean, I think it's capture someone's attention.
Ben Smith is BuzzFeed's editor. He concedes that Andrew Sullivan makes a principled argument, but he likes to say that native, or whatever you want to call it, is merely an evolving journalistic convention.
I think that we're in a moment when the conventions are being worked out, and we're very eager to be part of working those conventions out. I think between us, the New York Times, CNN, everybody who's doing it, that stuff is becoming clearer to readers.
Certainly this is true. Just about everybody is jumping into native. Even the New York Times, a cathedral of journalistic ethics, if there ever was one, now has an entire department devoted to native content. That department regularly produces deeply clever ads that are almost identical to the newspaper's deeply clever stories. Like this one about women in prison, sponsored by Netflix and its Orange is the New Black series.
I think I had that look in my head of what a woman in prison might have looked like.
Someone at a conference last year asked the head of the Times' native content department whether she's worried about erosion of journalistic integrity.
I love that question. So, Terry, let me start by vigorously refuting the notion that native advertising has to erode consumer trust. Good native advertising is just not meant to be trickery. It's meant to be publishers sharing its storytelling tools with a marketer.
Purists, of course, consider that nothing more than sophistry.
But hiding behind all these unimaginable euphemisms and Orwellianisms, we're doing branded editorial, sponsored content,
promoted stories.
Promoted stories, paid posts, native advertising. I mean, to my mind, one fundamental check of whether there is a certain amount of bullshit going on is the English language. When they can't actually say, we're running articles that are really ads, and we're protecting ourselves by a tiny little disclosure up there, then you know they're full of it.
Atlantic Magazine's early venture into native content was downright crass. 2 years ago, Atlantic effectively sold editorial space to David Miscavige, the head of the Church of Scientology, then made sure that negative reader comments were removed. Eventually, embarrassed, it yanked the whole article. BuzzFeed's editor says he would never allow that. BuzzFeed, he says, clearly marks its ads.
But yes, absolutely. I'm religious about it, in fact. But no, I think trust is incredibly important, and our readers' trust is very valuable.
But the disclosures are tiny and easy to miss, especially when the sharing starts. BuzzFeed's model, in fact now everyone's model, is to get people to click and then to share. Sharing is crucial. Everybody from BuzzFeed to the Times to the CBC wants to be shared nowadays. And once the sharing and resharing accelerates, any distinction between real stories and native is lost.
In fact, you don't even know half the time whether the article you're reading is from Rolling Stone or BuzzFeed or Twitchy or whatever.
Furthermore, it hardly makes any difference anymore whether it's a journalist writing the listicle, as they're called in the business, or an ad writer. BuzzFeed drew 5.3 million clicks with a listicle of 29 struggles only people with big butts could understand. That was technically a journalistic listicle.
Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt.
But advertising listicles are just as inventive and copy journalistic listicles precisely. Not a problem, say industry execs like Troy Young. Readers, he says, are smart enough to discriminate.
I think consumers are smart, and I think that if they see the value of the product eroding, that they'll look for options. I have never had access to more news, to more point of view, more quickly than I have today. I think that the ecosystem of readers that exists around that content is an amazing filtering mechanism for what is right and true and worth my time.
Andrew Sullivan, unsurprisingly, takes another view.
When the reader is supposed to be intelligent enough to see through your deception of that reader, you have the wrong idea of what reader intelligence is about. Hey guys.
Sullivan and the people at his blog, The Dish, accept no advertising. They sell subscriptions to survive, and they're proud of that, but they're just barely getting by. Other publications have moved towards becoming charitable trusts.
Those are two perfectly good options. Downsize dramatically and start over with ethics, or find yourself a sugar daddy to pay your way.
BuzzFeed, on the other hand, now employs a Pulitzer Prize winner amongst its growing number of investigative reporters. It sends correspondents around the world. It hires every day, all thanks to native content.
I think it's allowing us to pay for just an enormous amount of really, really high-quality journalism, and without any suggestion and any demand for ethical compromise. So yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable.
It's not terribly hard to see where all this is going. Most journalism is ultimately a business, and highly principled profitability in journalism was actually a 20th century phenomenon. It's a free market, and ultimately, the line between church and state at a journalistic institution is whatever its owners say it is. For The National, I'm Neil MacDonald.
Well, that fuzzy line